Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the CA Level 7 webinar on Mobile SSO. Give app users a break from typing passwords. I'm Leif Bildoy, Senior Security Product Manager with CA Technologies. And today I have with me Tyson Whitten, who is Director of Mobile Solutions Marketing in CA Technologies. We will maybe wait another minute. I see there are people still joining, so I'll give it a minute, and we will get started. So we have a couple of housekeeping items here first. You can reach Tyson or myself on these email addresses. We have a list of different social destinations here where you also can reach us. After the webinar, if there are any other questions that we may not be able to answer here, you will have the option of typing questions into the sidebar, or you could use the hashtag L7webinar. So with that, I would like to first hand over to Tyson, who will talk a little bit about background for around passwords in mobile application, etc. Tyson?
Thanks, Leif. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm just waiting for you to hand me over control presentation rights there. Great. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks again. My name is Tyson Whitten. I have solutions marketing responsibility for mobile security at CA Technologies. I think today's conversation as it relates to passwords and just the frustration that users are having as it relates to passwords, especially as it relates to the mobile platform, is very timely, and especially as it relates to the recent announcement of Apple's Touch ID. So I think that's just recognition, in the marketplace that users are frustrated, right? It's an issue as it relates to mobility in terms of entering usernames and passwords, and so there needs to be a better way and a more convenient way. I think over time, if we kind of look back just in terms of kind of the evolution of things in terms of entering passwords, through different types of form factors, I think, which would you rather use? I mean, from the keyboard, through the mobile device and the BlackBerry up through the touch screen, while that evolution has proven to be an improvement in terms of usability within the device, I think adding in these different types of form factors as well as the increase in mobile applications has caused complexity as it relates to entering in usernames and passwords, and it's had implications as it relates to even the security and the strength of passwords that individuals need to enter. And so I think as you start to think about just the increase in volume of apps, compounded by the fact that it is somewhat of a more complex form factor in terms of entering usernames and passwords, that's going to cause frustration from a user perspective, and really the result's going to be people entering and use simpler passwords at the end of the day, and so there could be security implications. The one thing that I will add is that this will only become more frustrating. I think one of the stats that I saw recently is that an average of 41 apps are downloaded on a per device basis. So that's as of today, and from a business perspective, that's going to the distribution of those apps is only going to increase, and I think by the year 2015, 25 business-relevant mobile apps will be deployed to the mobile device. And so that compounding factor of the increase in mobile apps is only going to is only going to impact the frustration from a user perspective even more. And so there's a lot of decisions we have to make in terms of what businesses we're in, and as IT and security professionals, we fall across this spectrum, right? So do you fall kind of on the far left in terms of providing more convenience but opening up your organization potentially to more risk, and that could result in the fact that maybe you're not deploying a certain or a required level of security at the device, or you're at the other end of the spectrum in which you are accessing sensitive information. You have certain individuals, whether it be consumers that are accessing sensitive information or employees that need to access sensitive information, in which you need to deploy more security on the device and within the app itself. And at the end of the day, that could result in a less convenient experience for that user. But I think the challenge there is finding that right balance. I think, from an audience perspective, I would think that a lot of us would fall more on that right-hand side. And so what we're hearing from our customers and from the marketplace is that we need to improve that convenience, that experience of the user. I mean, the mobile device is built upon the premise of usability and improving the experience. And as soon as you start to inhibit that, inhibit the business processes that go along with using the mobile device, the security solutions are going to fail. And so you need a solution that provides that right balance. And that brings us to really the focus of today's conversation is really around single sign-on and mobile single sign-on, and that type of solution being able to provide that convenient experience for users across mobile applications. But in order to get there, I think what you have to take into account and what you have to realize, there are three different things. And the first, and what we just went through, is a realization and understanding that users don't want to enter passwords anymore. I brought up the example of the Apple's Touch ID and that realization that them coming out with different solutions in order to help solve that problem. Number two, the mobile app strategy will drive different security solutions. So we all have different requirements based on what our businesses are and the challenges that we're trying to solve. And the result there is most likely going to be a blended approach given the application or the mobile app strategy that you're trying to deploy within your organization. I'm going to go through a few of those examples. And then number three is really a realization. I'm sorry, I think the end of that sentence is cut off there. It's realization that depending on what mobile app solutions that you decide to deploy, you're most likely going to result in different levels of security and different trade-offs that you're going to have to take into account as well. And so from a selection standpoint, there's different things that you want to think through as you determine what mobile security solutions you need to deploy within your environment. The first you have to take into account is the web browser versus native mobile apps. A lot of the organizations that we deal with, and it really depends on where you are from a maturity perspective in terms of your mobile strategy, it could be this blended approach in terms of you're attempting to leverage existing web applications and provide access from the mobile platform to those existing web apps, or it could be through HTML5. Or there could be some type of driving factor which will require you to develop more mobile apps. And from what we've seen, there's a significant increase in terms of our customer base, which are looking at different mobile projects in which they would develop new mobile apps for their customers as well as for their enterprise employees. The next thing you have to take into account is what are you connecting to? Are you connecting to your back-end enterprise? Could be consumer use cases in which you're developing new mobile apps in order to engage your customers better. Or are you working with third parties, right, with commercial off-the-shelf types of software, and you need a way to, say, improve productivity for your employees, and could be working with different types of businesses, say, such as Salesforce or Workday. And so those right there are going to result in different types of solutions themselves. I think the first thing to think about is in one instance you may have access to the code and the mobile app code, whereas the other you don't have access to that code, and so that's going to result in different types of solutions that you're going to need to deploy. The third thing to take into account, and which is on a lot of our minds, is who are you enabling? Are you enabling your employees, and are you enabling their devices that they're bringing into the enterprise? And those come with implications. They come with privacy implications. That comes with liability implications as well. Or are you trying to enable consumers in which you don't have access to the device and can't control the device in the first place? And so what you see is, what we've seen is this shift in terms of the focus around how we want to secure the mobile platform. Is it more of a device-specific approach, or you want to focus more on the application, the mobile app itself? And what we've seen is that shift from device to the mobile app, which can help in terms of being more precise in terms of what you want to control, and take a more risk-based approach in terms of the types of apps you want to control, enterprise apps, versus the employees' apps that they're bringing into the environment, which you may not care as much about in terms of the sensitivity of information within that mobile app. So there's a lot of factors that you need to take into account, and those are going to result in different types of solutions. And so just to sum up what I just went through, you could be accessing existing web applications through, say, Safari or Chrome, through those web browsers on the mobile device. But that may not be the end game. There may be different requirements that you have that would then drive you to start developing new mobile apps. It could be rendering issues, right? You want a better experience for the user, or take better advantage of what a mobile app will be able to provide to your end users. It could be local data storage, and giving your users access to information all the time on the device when offline. And so that's going to then drive you and guide you towards a mobile app project, of which you would then most likely have to connect to the back end through an API. And so you can see there that now you have to take into account securing the API, enabling the API, and then securing the API as well that's exposing sensitive information out to the world. And then the third example here is commercial off-the-shelf apps, which I brought up previously. And so this would be connecting back to third-party providers in which you wouldn't have access to the code, and it wouldn't be necessarily going through the API itself. And so that's going to result in a different type of solution. And so for the first, primarily, and what we've seen is that for web-based access, organizations are taking advantage of, say, web access management capabilities or federation capabilities, right? Maybe extending that out to the mobile platform. Number two, and a lot of folks on the call are very much aware, and specifically with Layer 7, you'd be looking at different types of API security and management capabilities to enable the connectivity to mobile apps, enable your developers, but secure the API as well. But since you have access to the code, there are different capabilities that you could deploy and ingrain within the app itself, whether it be advanced authentication capabilities and then single sign-on capabilities as well, which is a big focus of today's presentation and what Leif is going to go into in more detail. And then the third, since you don't have access to the code of the app itself, so say for Salesforce or Workday, one solution could be an app wrapping type of approach, or containerization approach, in which you protect or place a piece of security around the application itself. And so the way that we look at this at CA Technologies is that you can't look at these in individual silos. Undoubtedly, you're going to have different requirements across the business, maybe even with different business units and different use cases and situations that you have to take into account. So really the type of solution needs to be blended. You need to take a blended approach that weaves in web access management, API management security, SDK applications within the mobile app itself, as well as app wrapping and containerization approaches, and then deliver this as a unified security solution, across the web and APIs. And so within CA, just kind of break this down just in terms of areas of investment, where we focus across, essentially, to simplify things, 3 different areas. The first is device, second is app, and then the third is content. And so from a device perspective, we have MDM capabilities that we offer to the marketplace. And as I said, you start to see a shift in terms of even us as MDM vendors as well as different players in the market, shifting to different types of solutions that they can then apply as it relates to the app itself. But what we offer here is very, very broad in terms of the way that we try to solve the challenges as it relates to the mobile app itself. So the first is API management security, and so that is, of course, enabling the backend connectivity through RESTful APIs, as well as doing that in a very secure manner. The second is around application development, and so through Layer 7 as well as through other types of virtualization capabilities, a big focus is around helping to accelerate the development of mobile applications. And then the third is around application management and security. So that could be considered a combination of different mobile application management or MAM technologies as well as app wrapping technologies. And then content. So content, as we know, data is ubiquitous. It doesn't stop at the device or at the endpoint. It flows through it. And so really organizations need to take more of an intelligent approach to data, understand what the information is. Is it based on policy? Is it regulated? Are there internal policies around that data itself? And then control it, whether it be through different DLP products or different encryption types of products as well. So at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Leif, and he's going to start going through some different scenarios as it relates to mobile app projects that you're most likely encountering within your organization, the challenges that you're most likely facing, the decisions that you have to make, those different selection factors that I brought up earlier, and then the different types of solutions that we can offer to help solve those problems. Leif?
Okay. Yep. Let me swing that slide there. Okay. So first, we're going to look a bit about who's involved in a mobile app project typically. So you would have usually a chief mobility officer or someone who is looking after the overall strategy and whether relates to what kind of data and scenarios you're going to support, whether it's in-house, outside, outsourced approach, and so on. You will have a product manager that typically looks to enable customer engagement through applications. So in case it's a B2C scenario. And then you have app developers that tend to look more after, the application experience, the user experience. Is it great? Do we really serve the customers here or the employees in a proper way? Because it's important, we know, the usability aspects and so on. The bar is just a lot higher than a few years ago. Now, then you have an enterprise architect that look at how you connect the pieces together. In your enterprise, you might have some new data silos. There might be some old legacy data that you want to connect to. And finally, you got an information security function that is actually looking after how you expose this data that you're going to leverage in your applications. So this is quite some audience that is involved, and but fundamentally you have a gap. Your challenge is to bridge the gap between security on one end and UX and app development on the other, because these different functions tend to have different objectives. In that security wants to control access to assets, and the focus security has is usually on restricting access, preventing people that are not authorized to have access, to keep them outside the premises. And quite important, security don't understand necessarily all the app development requirements. So what about app development then? Well, they tend to think about how can we bring this application quickly to market. App developers tend to be measured on number of downloads, and the general view is that security is something that obstructs the user experience. And if you were to pick between speed and stability, well, an app developer would probably go for speed in many cases. So one more thing to keep in mind here, security standards keep evolving all the time. Security folks are the experts for that, and you shouldn't put that burden really on app development or user experience folks. That's not their primary task in this context. So this is really the challenge you have. How can you make this all come together? So the enabler here would be APIs. You would use APIs to connect devices and clouds and to the clouds and to the enterprise data centers. It doesn't really matter whether you're on-premise or a SaaS solution on the back end. You don't want to connect to. The principle is the same, and you're exposed to the same set of threats, and that's the key problem here. You don't want to. So you want to apply your security measures that you are maybe in some cases being dictated by the security folks, but you don't want to make the convenience go away. So you need to really strive to find that balance between an application that is usable but also secure. And this is really an old. There's nothing new really. It's an old trade-off that applies to security in the general context. So let's look at what this backend security will look like, because fundamentally you have some data in a data center, and you might want to consume that from a mobile application, and in the IoT case, you might want to also not only consume, you might want to produce data out in the nodes and the leaves and get it processed in the data center. So this moving data here is the challenge. And you also need to manage your developer communities. And that might be singular or plural, it might be internal or external. The challenge is still there. So what does this look like in a little bit more detail? Well, you have your API or your service running on the far side of the diagram here. And now you have, so this is your enterprise network. You have a directory, and then you would need some sort of API management placed at the edge of your network. So in a DMZ, typically, it might be a hardware appliance, it might be virtual, or it could be software. Doesn't really matter. You need that function there between your firewalls, and that allows you then to get some control over the different entities that will consume or produce APIs and data, and that goes across the edge of the network here. So whether it's the cloud service or a mobile device, it's the same thing. You need a set of policies to govern that access. You need to enforce those policies at the edge of the network. So what else do you need? Well, you need to think a little bit about the use case of a mobile app. So the problem is how does this application access this data? I mean, because you got mazes of firewalls, you have diversity around clients. We all know about how that client side looks like with Android, iOS, some BlackBerries, a couple of Windows phones, etc. And there may be a few others coming as well as you look at Firefox OS and so on. But you got diversity on the client, you got diversity on the back end. You don't typically want to change any kind of legacy applications running in the back end. doesn't make sense to re-architect anything if it's already there working. And another observation here that's worth looking at is clients and servers tend to change at different rates. So where you're typically on the client side would be in a high velocity. There's always changes on the platforms on those sides. So key problem, getting access. So that means that authentication, authorization is a particular interest. Single sign-on is of particular interest because we know that it's all cumbersome to type passwords on devices. Apple has realized that, and as Tyson mentioned, the Touch ID is a step in that direction. And there will be others. There are folks like Bioname in Toronto that has an ECG-based authentication scheme. That space will just grow. So this is all of interest to us and you as an application developer. The other thing you need to think about is the secure transmission. How can you secure that channel in to the enterprise? So we want classic single sign-on. Single sign-on isn't new. So we want single sign-on in active profile for us. So could we leverage WS-Fed here? Is it SAML second act? We want something like a VPN, but with a better experience. VPNs tend to suck from a user experience point of view. And that's why we've seen recent trends where you get a split per application, split VPN and so on. That's all nice and good improvements. But what you want here, if you look on the left side, you want to have a sign-on group, if you like, between your enterprise apps. So you want to have those apps share a session, single sign-on session. And the other thing when you're designing this stuff that you really got to think about is isolation. And mobile architectures, mobile OS architectures are addressing this now. So where you basically get containers, silos, and per app silos, and you can also split between the app layer and persistence layer. And that's all nice and good and helps in improving the security of your system. So the solution here to these problems. We have just released a MAG, a Mobile Access Gateway 2.0 release, which has a number of enhancements on the gateway, which is usually deployed at, we talked already about the edge of the network. That component will provide you the server-side security pieces and API management. And this is optimized for mobile use cases. So that's the first step. So now we're talking about protecting those back-end APIs. The second step you have here is with a mobile SDK that we provided for the iOS and Android environment. And this is really optional, but it gives you that extra assistance in writing mobile applications because the security architect will populate the API gateway with a whole set of security policies that honestly app developers should never really be concerned about. So now if you're out on your own, you're writing your own code, your own applications, you typically will need to access those API and those endpoints. And to simplify that job, we thought, okay, let's put this all together in an SDK that will provide some client libraries for mobile developers so that they can have a single API they can call that will address all the security aspects, that will basically apply all the security rigor that is deemed necessary by the security architect. So one of the things that is important here, this solution is built for both a B2C, a consumer application, and a BYOD world, so enterprise application world. It's based on standards using OAuth, OpenB Connect. We'll come back to that in a little second. And it provides that setup of the secure channel and also with a single sign-on. We're using cert provisioning for SignOn and transaction signing as well here. The whole strategy around this was basically, don't make me work hard, but give me strong and extendable security model. So being extendable is very important because even within an organization, there will be different APIs that require different level of protection. So the first thing you really need to do is to figure out what assets are you going to protect and what are the potential threats against those, and then you'll from that figure out what mechanisms do you need to put in place. But generally for us, providing solutions for clients from having a number of different deployment scenarios, being extendable was one of the key requirements when we designed this. So with the solution, you're transferring the security responsibility to the folks that know what they're doing, the security architects and so on. Developers are just going to leverage this simple API, and that comes in and aligns with the development environments that you use already for iOS and Android. Now, there's another thing you need to think about. With all these devices around you, sometimes you end up losing a device or it gets stolen and so on. So you do need to think about how should a solution like this accommodate for the case when a device is lost or stolen. That's one thing to keep in mind. Another aspect that is extremely important, and we can spend some time on this. There are three entities in any mobility scenario that are extremely important here when you're considering fine-grained security policies. So you need to know something about the user. The user has applications. These applications tend to run on devices. So this triangle, these three entities, has properties that you will need to address. So you need a way to identify users, and we talked about biometrics a little bit, and I said already that there's an area that this can explode. You need to identify your applications, and now you need to identify your devices. This was the sort of holy grail to the whole thing here, because the MAG, or the Mobile Access Gateway, are keeping mappings about these relationships, because you can easily see that you would like to be able to revoke access to application B running on device Z, and so on. You want that fine-grained. The whole point is that you want to have that fine-grained policy capability on the back end. And the good news here is, of course, that there are already some protocols available that handle some of these aspects. So we decided to leverage these protocols. So OAuth 2.0 is used for the tracking of applications through access tokens. So each application will get its own access token. We use OpenID Connect to provide a token, a user token, to the user. And this is actually used for a single sign-on session. We'll look at that in a second. And we use PKI, we use certificates to track the device. And this will have some implications that we're going to talk about later about when we talk about integration options on the device and on the access gateway with other technologies and other providers of certs. But this triangle here is extremely important for you to understand, and the implications that will have for API security. So we mentioned this already. We're using these three protocols for the provisioning of the device, and this allows us to keep a clear distinction between devices, users, and applications. And we are using the username password as an initial. This will be the enterprise credentials. Exchange that from the ID token, and you'll then get an access token, a refresh token per app. We have a certificate signing request going from the device on the first time registration, and the mobile access gateway will sign that cert and return that to the device, and the client libraries will take and handle all this protocol flow. So basically, the application developer, if you're using the libraries, you will not have to do this. It's under the hood. So let's look at the client side. And this is kind of an important diagram because it shows the concept here. So the outer circle is the device, represents the device. Right in the bottom there, you can see some third-party applications. With this solution, we don't touch those at all. And this is really about enterprise applications that are signed by the same enterprise developer key. And you see that in the upper part, the enterprise apps, you have application A and B. Both are written against the SDK. Each application will have its own private keychain. In that keychain, the access token that you get from the gateway and the refresh token will be stored. And essentially, no other application will be able to access that private keychain. So in the case of app B, only app B can access that private keychain. And this is based on platform security in iOS and Android. So if there was an application C somewhere that wanted to access this, that would fail unless application C has been able to break the platform security. So the other important element here, and this is again, we want to leverage platform security that is on devices and in those platforms. Right in the middle, you see a shared keychain. So this is a feature of the client operating systems. Any or applications, not any, but applications signed by the same key will be able to share this. Think of it as shared storage. So in here goes the trusted cert, server cert, device identifier, and private key, public cert, and the JSON web token goes in here. So what happens on startup when you let's say have application A and B installed, you fire up let's say application B. If it's the first time you do this, then the library will essentially check if these artifacts are available, and if not, if any of them are missing, it would trigger a registration process. And this registration process will then go through a number of steps that will be adequate in order to obtain these tokens and so on. And now the device application and so on will be registered on the Mobile Access Gateway. So now you open up application A, it will find that these artifacts are now in place, and the user will not be challenged for credentials. So essentially, you are allowing single sign-on through this model. So what's the benefits of this? Well, we clearly say we have single sign-on here for mobile applications, for native applications. We're removing password typing on devices as much as possible. We're not using insecure browser redirects. Another observation is that browser redirects tend to be and have impact on the user experience. We wanted to have a system in place where we don't really depend on third parties applications like a browser. It's all components. The UI components are all part of the library, are all signed by the same enterprise key. That's very important. We also wanted to have a system in place where that could be extendable and where maybe there are other protocols in future, maybe there are protocol extensions and so on. We wanted to create a way to enable secure transport. So we're basically enabling mutual SSL for API calls, and that allows applications to consume these APIs in a secure fashion. On the administration side, we're providing, so on the gateway side, we're providing an admin console where you, as a system admin, can get a view over users, apps, and devices that are provisioned. You can revoke tokens and so on. You can set the time to live on the token, etc. There's another features of this. You can configure the system so that it's a manual mode where there isn't an automatic provisioning flow, but basically you will get upon request from the mobile app, you will get a message saying you need to go to the IT admin and maybe show another piece of proof of identity and so on. Some organizations like to have that manual step there, but it's not necessarily. It's an option. The other part which relates to this, we mentioned before, if devices are stolen and so on, lost, the user can go in on a self-service portal and basically revoke tokens and manage their app entitlements. All in all, this solution improved the DX, the developer experience. So we're providing a simple device API, and this will take care of all the underlying declaration of API calls, and whether it's tokens that's required and so on. The library will handle that. So I'm not going to go into all the details here. The Mobile Access Gateway, or the MAG as we call it, has a number of features. We have push notification, integration. We can proxy and manage app interactions with social networks. I would like to call out the adaptation capabilities. A very popular feature is XML and JSON transforms, and you use that in case you have some legacy data in the back end that you want to expose to mobile applications. You can do that through policy here in the gateway. We have XMPP proxying capabilities and WebSocket support, and these are features that that are not new with the 2.0 release, but existing features. You can aggregate. Optimization is very important for mobile. You can aggregate mobile requests through policy and so on. So there's a whole bunch of very neat functionality for mobile app developers that you can take into use here. The new stuff here is the granular access policies at user app and device level that we have done now through this Mobile SDK addition. you can look at this. We're going to provide the material, and there's additional material available for in more detail on this. So when is that mobile access gateway relevant? Well, are you exposing backend APIs? Are you writing apps that consume these exposed APIs? Do you require mobile SSO for enterprise apps? Do you require mutual SSL for secure consumption of APIs? Integration. Do you require integration into cloud services or any other legacy data you want to integrate? Do you require location-based access control? Well, you should consider the mobile access gateway then as part of your solution. All right, that's it. Questions?
Hey, Leif. So we have some questions that came through that are product related. So let me read them off to you. So I think you just went through some of them. There's some questions just in terms of what the MAG was, so the mobile access gateway. But could you just give a quick summary of the difference between that and the API gateway? I think you just hit on some of the major points, but if you could just reiterate that, because that was a specific question.
Okay, so we have a family of products in Layer 7 or CA now, and the mobile access gateway is really targeted towards mobile use cases. So we have WebSockets, XMPP support in there that you don't have in the API gateway. We have OpenID Connect support. So it's all about how do we enable developers to write more apps, more secure apps faster. So that's really the difference here. You get a mobile SDK with the MAG. So it's right now for Android and iOS. So that's the main differences. And other than that, there's basically a shared feature set, but we are adding some mobile-specific use cases that we support on the MAG.
Okay, great. We have some questions specific to the SDK as well, so I can kind of go through those with you.
Oh, yeah.
So I think the first question is related to it supporting trusted execution environment. Could you respond to that?
So hardware root of trust. We are looking at working with Samsung Knox on this, where they are exposing APIs for this, and think about it, as a HSM-based solution where you can store your private key. We don't have that right now, but we're working on getting that out, and that's actually important to be able to do that properly and get that extra level of security around your client side. So very good question.
Yeah, we have another question from the same individual in terms of the SDK. Does it support hardware root of trust?
Yeah, so that's so as I said, right now we don't, but it's in the roadmap.
Okay.
And that depends, it depends on the OEMs, on the device manufacturers, and what they allow you to use and not. So I would say that in general, it's someone like Apple is probably harder to work with than others, but on that specific item. But whenever we have that capability, we will do that. So one thing that we are looking to support is also external sources of identity. So there are, for instance, CAC readers for PID cards in the U.S. federal space. We are looking to integrate that. So we don't really care where that source of identity comes from, as long as as we can pick that up on the client side, inject it into the API call, and then have the gateway validate against an external source. That's all fine. So again, this comes back to the flexibility that you need, whether it's for your organization or across different organizations. Security requirements tend to have these, various SKUs. So as a supplier in that segment, we really need to have a flexible solution.
Great. What about integration with social sites such as Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So we have some basic support on that in the gateway today. We're looking to extend that. We have that's a roadmap item for the short term. So next release, and where we'll support from client side, from the libraries, social. We'll be able to support social logins. So again, it's a different provider, an identity provider that we would use than the standard enterprise identity system, but that's kind of augmenting the solution. I think in the future this will be a set of a much richer ecosystem of identities than maybe we have today. So yes, it's something we will build in.
I have an interesting question here, Leif. You hit on that. So the three important entity slide: user, device, and app. Could you go through just some combination of scenarios in which that would be taken into account and why it's valuable? Just based on real world use cases.
Yeah, I think at the top we had a user, and you need to be able to track a user. You need to be able to track applications and devices, and you want to separate between applications. So I've seen some scenarios where if you start sharing access tokens or something like that, you're really getting down the wrong path, because you got to be able to track different applications. And you've got to be able to track all the entities in your system. So the fact that that there exist relations, you look at this as a graph, and that is extremely important for your API security. So you want to set that have that capability of setting that fine-grained policy, because this is just having an on-off, a binary kind of access mechanism on your back end, that just doesn't fly. So it's very important then that your API or mobile access gateway is able to track this, and that goes across whatever use cases you have. You might be very narrow on a specific use case you have today, but as soon as you deploy, you get another requirement for another application and so on, and you have multiple APIs typically. It can very quickly become a nightmare to manage that, but we're providing here a solution which gives you that flexibility that you will need.
Great. So what about integration with identity and access management? I mean, when I started the conversation, we talked about a blended approach, which most likely a lot of organizations are going to have to take into account, especially as they're dealing with web applications and then start to kind of take on new app development projects. Is there any integration today? I know there's some coming out in the future, specifically with SiteMinder. Is there anything that you can speak to specifically around that?
Well, so we have SiteMinder, enhanced SiteMinder integration in the near future, but having said that, we also integrate into, on the gateway, we integrate into a number of different IAMs, so beyond CA and SiteMinder, just so that is clear, and that's not going away. So it's and that's the strength of this solution, of this gateway, that it can integrate into so many different solutions through policy, essentially. So you don't necessarily need to write any code when we're talking about policy here and changing this, having these different configurations on the gateway. That's generally a policy environment, which is allowing you a much faster integration into those diverse backends. So we will, as I mentioned earlier, we will see a lot more fragmentation. We'll see a lot more diversity in the way of the bionames and the ECGs of the world. You know, there are heart monitoring, there are probably brain waves, all kind of different biometrics on the front end, or with fingerprints and so on. But then also there's diversity on the back end, and it's almost like an end-to-end mapping here that happens through the gateway, and will continue to be like that.
Okay, staying on the excellent. So staying on the integration track here, it's going to move into kind of the device world, or MDM. How does this work with an MDM solution today, specifically in terms of the solutions that have already deployed certs?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and it's important. So MDM solutions tend to focus a lot more on the device side there. So those three entities in that triangle, they tend to provide, security around data at rest, so encryption of data and so on the device. Very important, and we are partnering with a number of MDM solution providers like AirWatch, Mobile Iron, and CEA has we have our own MDM solution at Paria as well, so you can expect some integration there. It's quite an open landscape, but what they have in common, these guys, is typically they do some provisioning of certs to the device, and just as we're saying we can really integrate with any source of identity, we will be integrating into those solutions, so you get a more comprehensive solution as a customer. You don't need to worry about duplication, in terms of generating certs and so on, which doesn't make sense if you're deploying both types. Clearly, you would benefit from some integration. So, for instance, an example, jailbreak detection. We don't do that in the Mobile SDK right now, but that's something that the MDM solutions typically would do. And with the solution, you can basically, in policy, stand up an API on the gateway. We can get called out from the MDM vendor whenever they have a jailbreak detection, and we will be able to shut down APIs from that device. If it was a specific app or a user, we can shut access from that user overall down through that gateway. So this makes a lot of sense to do. And at the basic level, we can integrate with these solutions, or the customer can also do that very quickly through a few lines of policy, essentially. And
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say there might be other device contexts that the MDM vendor would have that might make sense to base a policy upon, an access policy upon. It could be application mix. It could be a lot of different things. But that is, at the policy level, it's fairly simple to do that.
Leif, perfect. That was great. Thanks for taking the time to answer those questions. We're up against the hour now, so we're gonna end the webcast. I want to thank Leif for joining the call and going through the release of MAG 2.0. I want to thank everybody else for joining the webinar as well. I think just as a point of of housekeeping, everybody that registered for this will receive the presentation through email tomorrow if they want to take another look at it. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining today's webcast. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you.